Good morning, welcome to Kimmel Bay Church's daily blog. We're in Acts chapter 28 this morning, our final book in the journey as we followed the early Christians on the adventure of the early church in the first century. I had a choice this morning whether to look at Acts chapter 28 or to do a summary and to wrap up the whole book. So I checked the Guinness Book of Records and no one's done it in under 10 minutes. So here you go, I'm going to give it a go. Dr. Luke gives us a theme right at the beginning, and the theme that he's given us is from Jerusalem to Rome. It's the spread of the gospel message from Jerusalem to the centre of the Roman Empire, the place to be in the first century. He's chosen to ignore the gospel spreading into Africa and Egypt and spreading into India, but he's following the gospel message spreading to the centre of the known world at the time. And the gospel message that was spreading was anybody can be saved, anybody can be set free, anybody can be healed and have peace with God in their hearts. And the gospel message, the good news, is it says this: anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Not anybody who joins a church, not anybody who comes religious, not anybody who reads a certain version of the Bible. Anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And we're given, Dr. Luke gives us an outline of the whole book in chapter 1, and it's an outline that the whole book follows. And it's chapter 1 verse 8: but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. That's Jesus speaking to the early disciples. And if you've taken nothing from today, or you've taken nothing from the whole series, please read that verse. Think about that verse for the rest of the day. That verse can transform your life and can transform your heart. So the book follows this outline, and we see chapter 2 to 7, the gospel spreading in Jerusalem and the birth of the early church. Chapter 8 and 9, we see the gospel going to Judea and Samaria. And then chapter 10, it goes to the ends of the earth. Chapter 10 to 28. So, Acts chapter 2, we see the birth of the early church. We see the fulfillment of that verse: you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. The Holy Spirit came on those early disciples, and it transformed them from weak, scared men to bold, courageous leaders who stood up against the religious leaders of the day to speak words of truth and words of love. And the early disciples, they received the Holy Spirit of power. And throughout the book, the Holy Spirit is mentioned 50 times. And in a way, it's a book that follows what the Holy Spirit is doing. It's the acts of the Holy Spirit. The acts of him moving on people, bringing God's new presence, bringing God's new power, regenerating people in their hearts, baptizing people, sending people, transforming people, guiding people, delivering people. And there's a pattern that emerges that we see in the early chapters. So chapter 3, we see the crippled man being healed by the Holy Spirit through Peter. And then there's a ripple effect. There's repercussions in chapter 4 and chapter 5. And persecution comes against people who stand up for the gospel, who fully live for God. We see this in Acts chapter 6. Stephen boldly preaches the truth to some Jewish people, and he's stoned to death. And then Acts chapter 8, I'm moving through it very quickly. Acts chapter 8, it says this: a great persecution broke out, and all the disciples were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Can you imagine those early Christians going, oh no, why is this happening to me? I was living for God, but we're being persecuted. What's gone wrong? But when we look back in hindsight, we see that God turned that bad situation into good purposes, because the gospel was spreading and more people were hearing the good news of love, grace, mercy and forgiveness that's found in faith in Jesus. And then we come to chapter 9. Chapter 9 is a pivotal chapter in the book. We see the conversion of Saul, the religious Jewish leader, to Paul the apostle. And it's so pivotal that Paul's conversion is mentioned 3 times throughout the whole book. And Paul himself asks two questions in this chapter. He says, "Who are you, Lord, and what do you want me to do?" And they're two questions that every single person should consider in life. Who is he, and what does he want each of us to do? And then chapter 10, we see the gospel going to the ends of the earth. We see the first Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, becoming Christians when Cornelius' household gets saved. The Holy Spirit through Peter moving in the lives of the Gentiles. And then we go to chapter 11. We're introduced to the city of Antioch in northern Syria. Antioch was actually the third largest city in the Roman Empire. It was a very diverse cultural city full of Jews, Greeks and Romans. And a move of the Spirit happened. Lots of people started becoming Christians. So the leaders in Jerusalem, they sent Barney down to help them. And Barney, or Barnabas, he's called the son of encouragement, but he's got a level head on him. Yes, he's wise, but he's got a lot of common sense. Common sense goes a long way today, doesn't it? And he looked at the situation. He thought, who's the best guy to help me? And he went and got the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was one of the most highly educated Jewish leaders of his day, but he was also a Roman citizen. He understood the Greek culture. He was the perfect guy to help in that situation. And they worked, and a great move of God happened there. And then in chapter 13, the Holy Spirit says, "Set apart for me Paul and Barnabas for the work that I have called them." And they go on 3 missionary journeys based from Antioch. They go on missionary journeys. And what do? They go telling people about Jesus. They share his love. They go and they make disciples. That was their mission. And wherever they go, God uses them mightily, and little churches are left by the believers meeting in their homes. And then they come back, and this is a great verse in chapter 14, verse 26. For anybody who aspires to be a leader or in ministry in the church, I love this verse. They come back and they reported all that God had done. It wasn't all that, hey, look what we've done. They reported all that God had done. He had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. And then after these 3 missionary journeys, Paul is compelled to go to Jerusalem. Even though he's warned on many occasions that there's going to be trouble, there's going to be persecution, he's going to end up in prison, Paul is compelled to go there. And Paul is a man of passion. He follows his desires and he follows what's right in his heart. And there Paul goes to Jerusalem. He does end up in prison. He's persecuted. And then he's sent to Rome. And we've seen the Holy Spirit being poured out throughout this book. In the course of the years of the whole book, hundreds of thousands of people have been touched and transformed by the Holy Spirit. There's been healings, there's been miracles, people have been set free from prison by angels, and the gospel's been spreading like wildfire across the world. And we've seen Paul, he's a man passionate about making disciples. He's passionate about individuals. He's passionate about people. Even though he's super intelligent, even though he's well educated, he's passionate about making disciples and introducing people to follow Jesus, because it's the best way that they can live their lives. And as a Christian, fully committed to serve God in his life, Paul was a man who went on the adventure and he served God with all of his heart, all of his life and all of his soul. A question to ask ourselves as we wrap it up this morning: what kind of adventure do you want to go on for the rest of your life? Do you want to see lives being transformed? Do you want to see people's hearts being blown away with the power of God for themselves? The same Holy Spirit that was around then, 2,000 years ago, is the same Holy Spirit who's around now. And the same Holy Spirit who can transform all sorts of people from different areas of life can be touched by the power of God. And then we come to the last chapter, Acts chapter 28. And when I read this the first time, I thought, wow, what an anticlimax. How does it end? It just abruptly finishes. We don't get to know What happens at the end of the story? What happens to Paul, so to speak? But now, as a Christian for 20 years, I've realised that the Acts of the Apostles, it's an unfinished book, because we've all been given that responsibility to write our own chapters in our lives, so to speak. And as I said, the same Holy Spirit is available to simple people like me or intelligent people like you. The same Holy Spirit is available and wants to use us to share God's love, not to make people religious, but so people can experience and come into a relationship with a God of love, to bring healing, to bring peace, to bring restoration into people's lives. In a world of fear, anxiety, of not knowing the future, the Bible or the book of Acts gives us a great hope that we can have peace with God, that we can have an amazing life regardless of the circumstances. Paul was flogged and persecuted, beaten to death in some places, yet he had peace with God and he served God. Have a great day, everybody. I'm not sure how long I've been. I hope I've not gone over 10 minutes. And I hope you've all enjoyed the journey, so to speak. Tomorrow, the legendary Hugh Williams will be starting us off on a new series in the Gospel of John, the Gospel of love. And we're going to see the adventures of Jesus' life and the miracles and the amazing things that he did. So I hope you can join us. Please join us on a YouTube channel or via Facebook. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. God bless.